Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. This is Shane with Shane Media. With season 2 of Chucky officially in the history books, I thought we could go back and discuss this train wreck of a season. Let's get into it. So just to give everybody an idea of who I am as a fan of this franchise, I really do enjoy these films and always have since I was a little kid, but I was never a die-hard fan. I can pretty much have some dumb fun with even the worst of these films. Seed of Chucky was definitely a bad movie, and I won't even attempt to put up any kind of a wall of defense for it, but it doesn't offend me. But I can absolutely see why it would offend anyone who's passionate about this franchise, because it is certainly not a good movie. But that being said, because I'm not a diehard fan, I don't really keep my finger on the pulse of the Chucky community or its fandom, so I really don't know what the general consensus is or has been of this series so far, but I personally really enjoyed season 1. There were some things about it that I could see where it would probably annoy a diehard fan, and I even took issue with some things, but as a whole, I was still invested in the story and the characters and had a good time and was really curious to see where they were going to take it with season 2, especially with the loose threads and cliffhangers we had at the end of it. So jumping off of that, I'm going to dive right into my opinion. And guys, I really did not like this season, and I really wanted to, and I even tried. It just didn't work for me. There were some things that I thought were done really well that were just peppered in here and there, but as a whole, I found it rather atrocious. There were some fun moments, but I think that the fun, and I say that with quotations, this season tried to have ultimately was its biggest downfall and its worst enemy. So, believe me, I am well aware that the concept of a mouthy killer doll passing its soul onto other different dolls and people in and of itself is a pretty silly concept, but we do have examples of how to do this in a way that works. In fact, we have examples of how to do it right in this franchise alone. Almost everything with Jennifer Tilly in this season was totally cringeworthy and almost unwatchable. They definitely teetered on that with the first season, but I feel like they never fully abandoned her character to the point of no return. Bride of Chucky was where this franchise really did it right, and it really started to embrace the camp, but still held on to whatever dignity this franchise and its antagonist had left. In fact, Bride of Chucky is my second favorite sequel, only topped by the original Chucky. Yeah, mine goes Chucky, Child's Play 2, then the first Child's Play, then Bride of Chucky. Those are my top 3 in that order. But it's a great movie. Those first 3 are really great movies in my opinion. And I loved the introduction and execution of Tiffany in Bride of Chucky. She was campy in moments, but when she turned on that killer switch, it was still absolutely menacing. And you knew she was not to be messed with. She would pop a one-liner or a quip or just, break the tension with a funny moment, just like every character in that movie kind of did, even Chucky himself. And normally I say don't make a joke out of your main antagonist, but I think we can give some leeway to Chucky given the subject matter. But they didn't make either of their characters one big punchline in that movie. But this season, they just make a complete joke out of her. And there are so many conflicting tones here. And honestly, that's something this entire series struggled with. But I still feel like season 1 juggled its tones a little bit better. You have Tiffany, who at the end of the first season removed Mika's arms and legs, and that was just some seriously dark stuff right there. Honestly, that was some of the darkest stuff in this entire franchise, but it was seriously psychological as well as brutal. But in this season, she's a complete laughingstock, and there's still some dark subject matter, don't get me wrong, but it's all over the place. There are children being killed in this series, a child will be killed in one scene in a very brutal way, and then they'll go full-blown spoofy comedy in the next scene. Pick a lane. And don't get me wrong, there are some filmmakers that can pull this type of filmmaking off where they weave in and out of tones and do it effortlessly and flawlessly, like Quentin Tarantino. I've used him as an example for a couple other things in my other reviews, but he's a master at it, and Don Mancini is not. It just seems like this show is at odds with itself and doesn't quite know what kind of a show it wants to be. It has an identity crisis. You have all kinds of little caricatures of Chucky, and I'll admit I did get some mild amusement out of the different personas that Brad Dourif gave us, but that's only because of his voice acting and his talent, so I'm not even going to give that credit to the show as a whole. In one iteration of Chucky, we get an homage to the muscled up action stars of the 80s like Arnold and Stallone, and at least that's how I took it, and I like that. And then we get a clear homage to Colonel Kurtz and Apocalypse Now. That was fun. But then we get this nice version of Chucky that just feels out of place with the other two. That was kind of weird to me. I didn't really like that, but Brad Dourif's voice acting was still very good. But all of it just seemed kind of pointless by the end of the season. It meant nothing and it went nowhere, just like almost everything else they threw in this season. It seems like they just threw everything at the wall just to see what stuck. And they threw all this stuff in there just to pad out the runtime, it felt like. Like, none of it had any clear through lines or endgame. You could have removed any one of these story elements, just added some minor changes, and I mean very minor, and you could have still gotten from A to Z with no problem, and that is not good storytelling. One thing I always harp on is that good storytelling should have purpose. Every scene, every character, every decision should have a purpose and a place within the context of the overarching story being told. You should be able to look back at any decision made, any character, every scene, and say, okay, I see what they did there. I may not have understood it at the time, but they were obviously setting up for this, and this couldn't have happened had they not done that. So, okay, I'm on board with that now. I get it. I liked it. You can retroactively even enjoy some scenes or appreciate some things that you may not have when it initially happened. But no, this season had very little of that. It's always nice to see Andy and Kyle back, and I really did like the throwback to the ending of part 2 that they gave us, but even it was, okay, and it was pretty effective, don't get me wrong, but unfortunately, that minor detail can't salvage this. And then there were just some odd choices made. One of them was a complete missed opportunity. Basically, all of episode 7 is a tribute to The Exorcist, and while that's obviously a great film and a classic, and I thought it was kind of neat to see all the homages to that film throughout this episode, I believe it was a total missed opportunity, as I said, to not give us any homages to Exorcist 3, since that was literally Brad Dourif's movie. Like, he was the main antagonist of that movie, and I thought it would have been a great opportunity to even give a little shameless plug for that movie, since it's a greatly underappreciated movie that I humbly believe is possibly even better than the original. But I digress. And I am aware that's an odd and maybe even petty complaint, since that isn't actually a flaw in the actual story being told here, but since I already don't like this season anyways, and that little nitpick did nothing good to help it, I'm still throwing it in the negatives category. But then we have Jake and Devin, and once again we're doing the same old song and dance that we did with them in the first season, except it worked a lot better in season 1 because it was the first time we were seeing it, and we were establishing these characters and their feelings for each other, and even though I don't feel like the chemistry was necessarily always there between the actors, I think the characters and their conflicts were written technically well. But in this season, it just felt redundant and like they were just completely out of ideas for these two characters. And that's sad because I liked these two characters in season 1. And I like the actors in this season. I think that you can tell that they're definitely more comfortable in their roles. I just don't think they were given very good material to bounce off of. And so what we get is the wasted potential of two good young actors, because I feel like this was an opportunity to expand their relationship and expand their characters and give us a little bit more development with these two. But no, they just, like I said, they wasted it. End of story. But then we get to the ending and oh my God, they couldn't have made worse decisions. I'm not saying they couldn't really knock my socks off in season 3. If we even get a season 3, if everybody else hated this season even half as much as I did, we might not be getting a season 3. But anyways, if we do get a season 3 and they impress me, I'll go back and retroactively change my opinion about how they ended this season. But they just made what I think were really dumb decisions. And as it stands, I don't like what they did with Lexi's little sister. Just in case you haven't seen it, I won't give it away, but those of you who have seen it know what I'm talking about, and I think it was just plain stupid. But I don't want to spend this entire review being so negative, so I will dive into some of the good things I liked about this season, because as I said, there were some positives here. And one major positive I have is the character of Lexi. I think she probably had the most compelling and maybe intriguing character moments of definitely this season, but maybe even the entire series so far. They were giving her some real life conflicts and things she was struggling with that are highly relatable to a lot of people, especially people who have gone through it. You know, the things she's gone through in the last 2 seasons. Unfortunately, things even a lot of young people go through in real life sometimes. I think they did a really good job expressing to the audience just what kind of trauma was left with this character after the events of season 1, and oddly enough, her character was one of my biggest complaints from season 1, so talk about doing a complete 180. And then we have the characters of Glenn and Glinda, and I actually liked the little character journeys they took these two on. It seemed to be pretty organic from where we left off at the end of Seed of Chucky, and I think they actually do a pretty good job of keeping you guessing about these two and constantly wondering whose side they're on, or if they're good or bad, or if they have their own agenda on the side that we don't even know about. And then by the end of it, they do a complete misdirect with their characters that I was intrigued by. And unlike most everything else in this season, I'm actually curious to see where they're taking that, even though I was definitely not happy to see that stupid Glenn doll back. And of course, Nika. I haven't disliked Nika in a single movie they've put her in. I like her character every single time, and you almost have no choice but to sympathize with this character. I mean, right from the beginning of her life, she's been dealt a horrible hand, and Chucky has been screwing her life up since before she was even born. He's killed her entire family, paralyzed her, and while Chucky isn't directly responsible for cutting her limbs off, he was definitely indirectly the person responsible for it. So she's out for blood by the end of this season because she finally escapes Tiffany, and you can't even blame her. I'll be honest, I was really hoping, though, that they were going to come into this season and tell us that all of that stuff that happened to her at the end of season 1 with her limbs being cut off was just a dream sequence or something, because my God, that was dark. And a little depressing. It's like, dang, this character just can't win. That's it, guys. I have nothing else good to say about this season. I thought it was horrible. In fact, there is one thing I forgot to mention earlier. That other little girl, Nadine, that they included in this season. She was highly annoying, and I'm not going to say I was happy to watch her die, but I was definitely happy that I did not have to listen to her talk anymore. So there's one more negative for you. But that's it, guys. You know the drill. Like and share this video. If you haven't already, please subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.